Welcome to Dad Hammer, Bolters and Booze, where we discuss all things Warhammer while staying hydrated with an adult beverage. I am David the Warboss, and I'm joined by the most generic Space Marine in the Imperium, Mr. Medicae Steve. Steve, how we doing?
We're doing great, man. Hello, everybody.
That's a little brief, Steve. I would
It is a little
expect
brief. Yeah.
just short and
I
to the
guess
point.
I guess it's been a minute since we've sat down and done this. It feels like, I don't know. I guess
Maybe
I was
you're so excited about all the content. You're like, yeah, hurry up. Let's get past the intro and get straight into it.
yeah,
Maybe that's it.
absolute vapor lock, man. Vapor lock. That's what it is.
Well, you're not wrong. We do have quite a bit to talk about. We're going to talk about just a little bit on the faction focus. That's the last of them as far as the Warhammer 40k 10th edition faction focus. A few thoughts there. The core rules have dropped officially, not just the sunroof view, the potato can pictures that we had before, but the full download. The free core rules have dropped, and we'll discuss those and some notable changes from ninth. So if you're coming from ninth edition, looking at the major changes and what has been altered from ninth to 10th. We'll discuss the pre-order bonuses that are coming with the Leviathan box set. There's been a lot of different bonuses depending on where you purchase and pre-order your Leviathan box set for 10th edition. And then the Tyranid Index has been released as of this recording. Very exciting, lots of new stuff there. And then with the Space Marines hopefully coming out tomorrow this recording. So lots of cool stuff, lots to get into. Hopefully that if you're listening to this show that you like it. If so, please make sure to rate, follow, subscribe, and on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen. You can find us on all the social media sites, but the best place to find us is on dadhammerpodcast.com, where you can see links to all of that, depending on where you want to download this podcast. But first, we're going to start with the most important part of every Dad Hammer podcast, and that is, what are we drinking? And Steve, I'm going to go first this time, and I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yes, please.
Because I've come up with a very fancy pants name for it, and it's on point. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I'm just going with it anyway. This is on brand with the Tyranid Index Release, so it's related to that, and there's a specific model, specific unit in the Tyranid army called the Swarmlord, and I thought, well, the Swarmlord would be the leader, but this particular drink is really just a Manhattan, so this is a take on, but a Swarmlord wouldn't drink a Manhattan. That's too high class. So this drink is called the Sir Reginald Swarmlord III, and that is the Swarmlord's high class cousin from upstate. I don't know where upstate is, but
it's
where
always better. It's always uppity.
Yeah. So this is just a Manhattan, but a very high class. I'm arching my brows as I hold this drink in my hand.
So got a little Mr. Peanut tuxedo and a monocle and
Monopoly guy. That's what I'm thinking about. Just right before I devour the enemy, as a Swarmlord does.
Yeah.
So this is 2 ounces of Rye Whiskey, 1 ounce sweet Vermouth, 2 dashes of Angostura Bitters, and then 1 dash of Orange Bitter. But I throw in an extra dash in there. I like the Orange Bitters.
Okay.
So you put all that in a mixing glass with ice, you stir for about 30, 45 seconds, then you strain into a chilled glass, or if you're like me and you're impatient, you put ice into your glass right before you're making the drink. So it's kind of chilled, but not really, but it's close enough. And then you put in the maraschino cherries in there. So I like to think of those as maybe some, if we're going a little spooky, and tearing it and devouring. Maybe those are eyeballs.
I was going to say the eyes of your enemies.
Yeah, Imperial Guard eyeballs, Space Marine eyeballs. Yeah. Well, this is my Sir Reginald Swarmlord III. Is your drink as high class as mine?
Not even close, man. I'm really cheating and kind of lowbrow this evening. Went to Sonic for dinner, and I usually get a half lemonade, half unsweetened tea. So I had a bunch of that left and poured it into a tumbler with some ice and filled the rest with Jack Daniels. So I'll just say that I'm the Swarmlords like cousin from down south. I don't
Yeah, that's
know.
like a Southern gentleman.
Yes, that's better.
Yeah, you're
And
Colonel Sanders Swarmlord. A little bit of fried chicken,
yeehaw!
a little bit of sweet tea. Well, unsweet tea. So I guess,
Yeah,
yeah,
drinking healthy.
that's right.
Right.
Well, very good, sir. Cheers and bottoms up, Steve.
Cheers.
Okay, let's get into the news. We'll start with the faction focus. We got a lot to cover, but we're going to first hit the new factions that were revealed, the final ones, I believe, unless I'm missing some. But there were 4 primary ones: Gene Stealer cults, Imperial Agents, which aren't really a faction, but we'll talk about that in a
Mm-hmm.
second. The Space Marine chapters, which is a kind of a controversial announcement in the way that they were announced, and then the Titans at the end. So we'll start with the Gene Stealers. I don't play Gene Stealer cults. The what I know of them, I see the models on the website, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll read a little bit, an article from here to there. But the primary knowledge I have of Gene Stealer cults comes from the Angels of Death animation from Warhammer Plus, which I
Me
thought was
too.
really cool. Um, so I did read over the faction rules, because that's always where my eye goes first whenever these factions come out. I want to see the primary rule, the main flavor text, and the cult ambush rule is the primary army rule. And essentially, when you lose, if your army faction is Gene Stealer cults, when a unit is destroyed, you roll a d6, and on a 4+, then you place a cult ambush marker down anywhere on the battlefield that's more than 9 inches away from an opponent. And then if the enemy model, excluding aircraft, of course, ends a move within 9 inches of that cult ambush marker that you placed, you remove that marker from the battlefield. However, so it's kind of going around and removing those if they get close to those ambush markers.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the reinforcement step of your opponent's next movement phase, each of your cult ambush markers that's still on the battlefield, so the ones that remain, you can select one unit from your army that is in cult ambush and set that destroyed unit back up on the battlefield using deep strike with all
Oh,
of its wounds remaining. So it's kind of like, I guess it's, if you lose a unit, the Gene Stealer cults, and you put those ambush markers are down to say like they're still lurking in the shadows. That's what it
I
sounds
see.
like to me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So a different flavor, I think, on the Gene Stealer cults. And when I think of the
Yeah.
Angels of Death animation, it was always very, very grim dark. It's kind of a black and white, except for the Blood Angels with the red coloring in that animation on
I
Warhammer
know, it's
Plus.
great.
But I liked the aesthetic of that show because it puts those guys, they're kind of skulking around in the background. And
Yeah, it may not fight to the death, but you could see they would slink back before they got wiped out,
yeah,
perhaps.
yeah,
Something
it
like
was
that.
like the mysterious assassin in the corner,
Mm-hmm.
but it was more about almost like a horde in the corner.
Right.
That's what this makes me feel like. So I don't know. Any interest in Gene Stealer called Steve?
Um, Not really. I think they're kind of cool as far as the models go. Um, I think they're a little bit out there for me. I I would like it would be neat if they had some synergy with the Tyranids because that's their whole thing. But I guess that they really aren't synergistic. They're just kind
Yeah,
of out there, sort of a cult. But I think if you I feel like this is a good army for the person who doesn't want to necessarily play guard or Astro
hmm
Militarum stuff, but they also don't want to play maybe Trader Guardsman, chaos stuff, but they want
yeah,
that feel of a that humanoid, maybe horde type army, something like that. That's not superhuman necessarily, not
something in
um,
between.
yeah, something in between, but just a little different flavor. I think it's pretty niche, but I think it has a very strong following. People who like that army really like that army, and
Yeah,
good on them.
I, I like what they did in the again, going back to the Warhammer Plus animation, Angels of Death. I like the fact that they highlight some of these armies that maybe, and I don't know how popular Gene Stealers are, but that if I'm not immediately drawn to what these models look like or even their background and lore and why they exist, I like that they're highlighting them on the animation. That just gives me
Yeah.
a little more understanding of the army and as an option. But
Yeah, I agree.
cool rules. I like the flavor text. We'll move on now to the Imperial Agents, which aren't really a faction. They're more just supplements to
Hmm.
your existing Imperial army, right?
Right.
They had Inquisitors, the Assassins. I think finally I can use the Assassin model that I got for free
Yeah.
through the Warhammer
Finally.
Plus subscription. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I can use that Rogue Trader. What is that? The Elucidian Star Striders.
hmm
I've got
hmm
that kill team. You can pop them in there.
Yeah, these are cool. I wish they had. We talked about this previously. I wish they had an inquisitorial
Yeah,
army.
I do
Just
too.
a whole lot of judgment. Looking
Oh
to
yeah.
cast out everybody that's not cheering for their team. Um, And essentially the faction focus is that you can add the agents of the Imperium to your existing Imperium army. You can
Hmm.
add more depending on the number of, or depending on the points value. If you're playing Incursion, Strike Force, or Onslaught, you can add more to it. So really, just the Imperial agents are just a way to add flavor to your existing
Yeah.
Imperium army. So a cool option. I'm
I
not
wonder.
super excited, but it's a cool option.
Yeah, and I wonder if there will be some rules maybe on boarding actions that you could combine these with your Imperial army.
hmm
I think that'd work pretty well.
Yeah, I would
Um,
think so. They seem more like a smaller squad
mhm.
type
I'd
of
I'd
a
be probably more
faction.
willing to use it in that setting than
Yeah.
maybe a bigger game, but yeah.
Yep. I'm sure somebody likes them. So that's
Yeah,
all good. Lots of
absolutely.
choice. Never a problem. So let's move on now to the Space Marines, the chapters. So quite a bit to go on here. This was the big
Mhm.
question going into the faction releases because Games Workshop had made some statements about, coming out with the index and making the Space Marines a little more have more choice about. It doesn't matter what you want to paint them and what they look like. You can still just run them as Space Marines. And so
Yeah.
for someone like me who just kind of wants to make them look cool, that's exciting. But I think for players that really bought into the theme and the colors, they want the rules to go along with it. So I think what they've released here is okay, but it's got me I guess, a little concerned for people that really want to get into their their specific chapter because what it sounds like to me is that they've reduced those chapters now down to just the detachments. That's what it sounds like. Is that what you're reading?
Yeah, it's hard to say. There are the detachment rules. Um I don't know how they're going to get around this because just say like Dark Angel stuff, right? You've got the inner circle and that's a whole, set of rule things that aren't really covered in this one detachment rule, this Grim Resolve rule they sent out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm confident that we're going to get the data sheets. That's not a problem. But the synergy with that team is the inner circle rules, the first and second company kind of stuff. The Death Wing, the Raven Wing. There were special little catches that they could get away with that were outside of the normal Space Marine rules. And my understanding is some of these others are the same. You're looking at the non codex coherent or compliant Space Marine
Mm-hmm.
factions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know if we're gonna have to wait for some other like codex index book release, or if they're gonna filter out these kind of special indexes for these one-off sort of chapters that they have. It could be interesting. It might steer people away from because some of these units are special for those rules. That's why people pick Dark Angels and
Yeah,
Blood Angels, and some of the kind of a little bit beyond just the aesthetic necessarily.
yeah, because I mean, I play Space Wolves, and I'm
Yeah.
looking at the detachment rule they have here, and the deeds, and the previous and the in ninth edition and the Codex, they especially in the narrative, the Crusade rules, you had these deeds of moment, and where you could make these grand, you know. Assumptions or telling tales around the campfire of all these great things that you're going to do in the battle, and you could get benefits and boons for doing that. They folded that in here, which I like. I think that's really
Hmm.
neat. Um, but like, what gives it the flavor of a Space Wolf army outside of, okay, the only way that you're going to tell is that there's going to be specific units, that are, I play Bjorn the Fell-Handed, for
Mm,
example, a
okay.
dreadnought that has all the wolf pelts and stuff all over him. So it's going to look Space Wolf-ish. It's going to have the colors and all of that. But outside of that, how do I guess how can you tell? And maybe that's the point. Maybe it doesn't matter. Because if I have a Dark Angels band, or I have some Ultramarines guys that they're just painted a certain color, then I could still roll them as Space Wolves. I mean, I guess
Right.
I'm looking at the data sheets, and I don't see anything on here that
Mm-mm.
says space. Well, I do see faction keywords for some groups that say Space Wolves, right? Dark Angels. It says that
Yeah.
in the bottom right, but maybe we just, I don't want to get too crazy on this before all of the rules and the codex stuff drops, because that's, easy thing to fall into. I'm just curious to see what they do with this.
Yeah. I would like to see a little bit more in depth. I think the only thing I have to go on right now is what they did with the World Eaters Codex at the
Yeah.
end of ninth, and just from my friend that plays World Eaters, they already went down that road of there was like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 separate detachment lists or
Hmm.
detachment rule sort of setups,
But that was
and
received well. I mean, people
it
like
was
that.
received very well. And my understanding is that's kind of where this is supposed to be heading.
Yeah.
Now, how they roll that out, I don't know. Will we get these free rules and everybody gets a detachment? And, if you want more, you got to purchase into something?
Hmm.
Or will it be added, later as PDF stuff? I mean, I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I don't want to
Hmm.
make any, snap judgments right now, because there's more to see, more to look at.
Oh, yeah. No anxiety or worry or anger. It's just interesting.
Yeah, agreed. All right, the last faction that they covered, which I don't want to know if it's a faction, more of as it's a type of model, but the Titans, which when you think of a Titan, you really think of the gigantic Space Marine Titan. That's what I think of, the big boys. But there are other Titans,
True.
and the only real comment here, I don't own any Titans, and there's a reason for that. It's because they're pretty dang expensive. Um, but I play orcs, as I've said before, and the orc gargantuan squigoth is one of the Titans. The thing looks awesome. It looks so great, and I would buy that in a heartbeat. But it's not $500 awesome. I mean,
Right.
$500. That's crazy.
That
I can't do that, in my
for
opinion.
one model, yeah, that's kind of nuts.
I mean, it's a big model. Don't get me wrong, but I don't. I mean, looking at the scale, it's a Forge World model,
Yeah.
and going back to our friend the Grandma Stampa, that thing is huge, and it's
Yeah, it's
like a
big
hundred
enough.
bucks. It's
Right.
$100.
Hmm.
So why is the Squigoth? I guess because it's a Forge World, and I assume it's resin. Then they have specific molds for it. It's more expensive to produce. Same thing with the Titans, maybe. I don't know. I would love to run these huge models, but I just don't want to drop $500, $1,000, on this stuff.
Oh, I know. I mean, you're not going to, and you wouldn't use it all the time.
Mm-mm.
I mean, because it's going to take up pretty much everything for you, I
Yeah.
guess.
I mean, assume I don't know what the points are. I've never played a Titan, but I would assume
Mm.
I don't know 600-700 points. At
No, I would
least
assume so, at least, maybe
uh,
even more. But
maybe.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I just like the tagline. So why would you bring a model the size of a small child along to your next casual throwdown? That was on the website, and I thought, and then they followed up. It's like basically because you can now. I was like, all right, that's fair. I like it. That's cool.
That's right. Yeah, I mean they look cool. I just wish they were a little more affordable. But
Yeah, yeah,
it is what it is. I guess that can be said by anything in Warhammer. I wish this was more
right.
affordable, but it looks really cool.
Yeah, that's a point of contention, isn't it?
Yep. Okay, let's move on now to some 10th edition news. There is so much content that
Ooh.
it's coming fast and furious every single day, and they've really slow dripped content every day. They in the central time, they're dropping it around 8, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, somewhere
Hmm.
around there every single morning. And within our group, whenever the new thing comes out, we're texting back and forth. Did you see this? Did
Yeah.
you see that? So there's a lot of hype around the Leviathan box. It is going to be released on the 24th of June, so the
Hmm.
next 2 or 3 weeks. There's a lot of different options for pre-ordering, and they're putting in a 2 week pre-order window, which hopefully will mean that everybody that wants a box will be able to get one. Um, and they've got a lot of different ways to pre-order. You can pre-order going into the Games Workshop Warhammer official store. Walk in there and pre-order it from there. You can pre-order it on the web store online, completely independent of, and if you don't have a local Warhammer store, you can just do it online. And there's a queue, a digital online queue that they have. Or you can go into your friendly local game store to
Hmm.
pre-order. Now, normally, I would say for us, and shout out to our local game store in Dixon, Blackthorn Game Center.
Absolutely.
I always go there for pre-ordering because they give a nice discount on all Warhammer products. So why would you want to go anywhere else? But and we pre-ordered there, but I think it's worth knowing for our audience that there are differences, and you get different pre-order bonuses.
Hmm.
And this is a miniatures company. It's a collector type of an atmosphere, so naturally the pre-order bonuses are also collector's items, which makes sense. Um,
Definitely.
but the pre-order bonuses that were announced, and Steve, I'm interested to hear your take. The first one, if you go into the store itself, you will be able to get these tokens,
Hmm.
the proprietary tokens, in a nice little tin, and it looks like objective markers. They're like an acrylic or translucent type of
Hmm.
a token, objective markers, battle shock tokens, and then I think these are wound markers as well.
I
Really
think
cool
that's right.
looking
Yeah.
thing. So if you pre-order at the local store, you get those. If you pre-order on the web store, you get a couple of battle mats which you could put together and play
Hmm.
a smaller game, Combat Patrol. And then finally, if you order from your local game store, according to this article, you get some tokens to mark where the deployment zones are, the little cardboard tokens that they've released before, or a dice tray. So
Right.
anyway, Steve, any thoughts, and what was your first impression of the pre-order bonuses?
I thought those bonuses were fantastic. Actually, I really like those tokens. I'd love to have them too. Um, you know, I was reading somewhere, and you basically break even. From what I'm kind of hearing. So if you order from either online, is it online or the GW store, whichever one you get the tokens, or the bigger package of extra swag.
The
Um,
local, if you go to the local store, local
this is a local
Warhammer
store.
store,
Okay,
Warhammer
so
store, yeah,
which it's the same price there as on the web store, so there's no discounts
correct.
given there. So what I read was the difference that you would probably get in a discount from a local gaming store versus what it would cost you to buy these extra pieces. You're talking about breaking even. So you're talking about
Mm.
paying MSRP and getting free stuff, or if you bought at the discount at a local game store and then bought these things yourself. Everybody's monetarily probably coming in even.
Yeah.
So I can see this as a not a gimmick, but a way for GW to say, hey, we want you to buy from us. Maybe they're trying to reinstill some faith in, all the bad blood that may have been happening lately over things not being available. We're saying we're going to have these things available, and here's an extra something for you that's no one else can get unless you order from us. I
Yeah.
think that's really cool. I like the idea of something that you can only get it if you order this particular item at this particular time from this particular place.
Yeah, I think what it's going to come down to though is for anyone who is contemplating, because you make the decision, do you take the discount
Mm-hmm.
from a local game store and just save money, um, or do you go for the limited, custom run nice tin that says Warhammer 40,000 Leviathan on it, and it comes with these fancy tokens? I think it's going to come down to, is it worth the full retail price? Is this box worth an extra 30, $40, potentially more, depending on the discount that you receive from the store,
Mm-hmm.
the local store? Um, is that worth that to you? And if it is, hey, go for it. Might
Yeah.
as well. But if not, then that's just a decision that I think everybody has to make.
I think I feel safer pre-ordering it from Blackthorn, right? I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like there's not going to be any monkey business there. If they can get it, they can get it. Um, I don't know. I haven't ordered anything from the web store or GW store in a long time.
Hmm.
So I don't know, how much of a rat race that's going to be. I will say I have gone into the GW store and was supposed to get one of those like extra swag items if you spent so much money or whatever. And it was like, oh, well, they didn't send enough of those out.
Yeah.
And that would be incredibly disappointing. So I would rather take the discount and not have
Because
the stuff.
because that's not limited, right? That's going to happen no matter what. That's a
Correct.
guarantee.
That's a guarantee.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think,
But it's up to you. I think the thing
yeah.
is that the price point they're talking about, man, you're not going to lose on this box either way, really.
No, the savings are really
Mm-hmm.
incredible. I've seen people posting where the savings for
Oh
what
man,
you would have to buy or what you would have to spend uh, outside of this box. I mean, you're saving like 70 to 80%, I think, something like that, and it's just an incredible value for what you're
yeah.
getting.
I watched Auspex last night and breaking it down, and you're talking now. This is talking multi-part boxes, so it's
Yeah.
not really a total comparison. But either way, for the Tyranid models and the Space Marine models, you're getting close to $900 MSRP.
Mm-hmm.
That's on the high end, but these, those will be multi-part boxes, etc. Versus what, I don't know, rumored 250 ish American dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so
I mean,
it's a
it's pretty
win-win.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I personally, I'm just going to go for the discount
Mm-hmm.
at Blackthorn. And the little deployment markers I could take or leave. The
Yeah.
dice tray is cool. I'll take
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
Anything free is nice. If I don't get the custom tokens, it is what it is. But for
I
me,
agree.
I'd rather have the discount. So,
I'd rather have a discount and buy like $30, $40 in paint and stuff, to be honest
yep,
with you.
there you go. Well, good luck for everybody pre-ordering. I hope you get what you want. Let's now switch over to the full rules. The core rules were released, and just as they promised. So it's in. You can go to their website right now. You can go to the download section. It is there for you to download. And this is not the limited rules, kind of like what they did with Ninth Edition, which were your handicapped rules. They just didn't
Mm-hmm.
have all of the advanced stuff in there. Now, when they say core rules, they mean all of the rules
Uh,
for
yep.
40k. So it's everything, which is awesome.
Yes. It's great.
Very exciting. It's a 60-page PDF. So there's way too much to cover in in just
Yeah.
in our show here. But I do have a few things that that stood out, that were different from ninth edition, and I wanted to talk through a couple of those. The first one being that vehicles and monsters can now be shot in combat, which if they're in melee combat rather. So if
Okay.
they're in melee fight phase with other units,
Mm-hmm.
but previously in ninth edition, you couldn't essentially when any unit were to be locked into melee combat. It kind of gives yourself a shield.
That's
So
right.
now you can't be shot, from other units. So it was
Mm-hmm.
a strategy to take some of your stronger units and go up and really lock them into melee with smaller units, and then you wouldn't be the target of a ranged attack, for
Right.
example. Well, now that's not the case.
Thank
Now you can
goodness.
be shot. Yeah, I like this. I mean, Steve, are you going to
Mm-hmm.
be using this any?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, if you're talking about adding vehicles yourself, with a lot of anti-vehicle kind of weapons on it,
Mm-hmm.
or big anti-armor weapons, you better believe it. Um, I think it's brilliant. I mean, because now you can tar pit somebody. You can
Yeah,
stick your little nothing squishimals out there, and
Squishimals.
and just let them get stomped on, and then fry the guy from across the board. I mean, I think it's awesome.
Like Squishimals is like a Warhammer brand of yogurt.
That's
So
right.
like the Danimals, but Squishables.
Squishimals.
Yeah, those are your Gretchen.
That's right.
Squishables. Yeah, I think it's a good rule. It just makes sense. Why would you not be able to shoot? I get that you don't, that because the game mechanic in ninth was that you don't want to hit the good guys. You don't want to
Right.
hit your team. So you can't shoot in with other. But yeah, I mean monsters and vehicles are big
Mm-hmm.
targets, so you should be able to shoot them. There is a
Yeah.
penalty. I think there's a -1 to hit, which makes sense. But I
Yeah.
like this rule. I think it's a good addition.
Let's speed the game up.
Yeah, definitely. Second thing, which I thought was a pretty big deal, grenades are no longer war gear. In ninth, they were
Yeah.
just an extra little thing on the data sheet that you could throw a grenade. I never
Mm-hmm.
really lobbed them because the range was so short. But they're no longer war gear. Now it's a stratagem, much more deadly now. So if you play this stratagem, you can throw a grenade 8 inches in range, which is
Mm-hmm.
more than I think the 6 inch, 5 inch, whatever the range was previously. You roll 66, and on a 4+, it's a mortal wound. So yeah, grenades are no joke now. I like
No,
this.
that's great. I mean, that's worth a CP
Yeah,
or
and
two or
now
whatever it's going to cost.
yeah, I think it's one CP, but
Mm-hmm.
even still, CP is going to be a little harder to come by. They're not handing them out like candy
That's true.
anymore.
That is true.
Um, so now you got to pick and choose what you're going to spend for stratagems. There's fewer stratagems to spend on, which is a good thing in my opinion. But now throwing grenades is you're going to have to decide to do that. But I think the risk reward is still there for you with a 6 dice on a 4+. You're
Mm-hmm.
bound to do at least a couple. I don't know what the math comes out to.
And especially if you have a unit that's struggling, maybe they have only they're lower than half strength, or they got down to one man or something.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be worth a hail mary.
Well, going back to Gretchen, could I take my Gretchen and go in there and lob a grenade in?
Shoot, why not?
I think so, unless there's a limitation to,
It could be.
there probably is, and I'm just
There,
I don't remember what that is.
yeah, maybe there's a blast keyword or something with grenade that
Oh, I think you're right. There's certain.
prevents you from doing that.
Hmm. Well, anyway, I like to think of Gretchen going in and lobbing grenades.
It's just no one
So
would care about them anyway, right? That's what they're voting
I
for.
I care about them.
All Gretchens matter.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking at this here. I'm actually looking at the CPU one. Grenades unit, it has to be a grenades unit from your army. So
Okay,
I would assume Gretchen they're not a grenades unit, which would make sense. So the
reasonable.
dream is
Okay.
already dead before it's
Oh,
before
well.
it's realized.
It was
That's okay.
worth throwing it out there, man.
I liked it. No pun intended.
Mhm.
All right. The next up is Tank Shock, which I didn't play. I didn't know about this rule in previous editions because I came in at eighth. but tank shock is a rule from I want to say 7th or 6th maybe.
Okay.
Um, but essentially, after a vehicle charge, you can roll a d6 equal to the strength characteristic of that vehicle. Which, yes, that means, I mean, if you're a knight, or a titan with a
Mm-hmm.
crazy strength characteristic up in the upper teens or 20, you're rolling 20 dice.
Oh my god.
And then you add 2 if it exceeds the target's toughness, which I would assume on a big boy it's going to exceed the toughness. On
Yeah.
every 5 plus, it's a mortal wound,
Whew.
which I think this is great. And going back to orcs, when I play a bone breaker, which is their tanky battle wagon thing with the
Mm-hmm.
steamroller, spiky steamroller of death on the front. You
Yeah.
roll. I don't remember what the bone breaker is going to be. Let's just assume it's 15 plus on their strength. But that thing's going to come in. I'm gonna roll 15 dice on a 5 plus. You do a mortal wound, which but it
Golly.
just makes sense. You think about
Well,
a
you're
knight, a huge thing coming in and stomping you to death.
yeah, man. I mean, you're rolling right through stuff that can't get out of the way. It makes sense. Again,
Yeah,
speeding the game up too.
yeah. Well, it makes it a little more deadly,
Mm-hmm.
but for the right reasons. It's not just adding mortal wounds everywhere, which I think
Right.
Sigmar does a good job of being deadly, but sometimes it can dish out the mortal wounds a little too much.
I see.
Cool rule. I like tank shock. I'm excited to use it, especially with my bone
Mm-hmm.
breaker. Um, all right, next up is Overwatch, which has become the talk of the town along with Battle Shock. So Overwatch now has a 24-inch range, and you can use it. It's a stratagem, of course, but you can only use it once per turn. But you can use it any time an enemy moves. So anytime, doesn't matter when.
Yeah.
If they're within 24-inch range, and you can, of course, you're going to roll just like you would in the normal shooting phases before, and you're hitting on sixes. But pretty cool. And
Yeah.
anytime anybody moves, you can roll Overwatch, which is a reaction type of thing.
So I like it because if you oh, what's the game? I just lost it.
I was thinking like XCOM.
No, it's the 40k one, battle sector.
Oh, right.
There's a mechanic in battle sector. If you have any action points left on your troops, you can set them in Overwatch.
Yeah.
And if your enemy moves within that like cone of influence or whatever,
Hmm.
they get to shoot Overwatch at the enemy when the enemy moves. And I always, when I was playing that game, I was like, man, that's a really cool mechanic, because sometimes you have leftover points that you can't do anything with. Your guys just kind
Right.
of stand around. They can't shoot. They can't
Yeah.
move. And this kind of reminds me of that. And I'm glad that for me, that feels right. And I like how it works.
But you don't even have to set them on Overwatch. That was
No, no,
always
no.
the with Battle Sector, for example, a little bit of a risk reward. You had
Yeah.
to, okay, I don't have anything to do with these guys. I'm going to put them in an Overwatch state, which means they can't do anything else. But on with this rule, you don't put anybody in an Overwatch state.
So you
You
don't
just spend.
declare it ahead of time.
I don't think
I
so.
haven't read it close enough to know, but
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it here. During your opponent's movement or charge phase, just after they set up whatever, one unit from your army that's within 24 inches that would be eligible to shoot if it were your
okay.
shooting phase.
Gotcha.
And so, as long as it falls in with that, you can shoot at the enemy as if it were your shooting phase. So essentially, as long as it's eligible to shoot, whenever the enemy moves, you're good to go. So I guess your unit would not be eligible to shoot if you had already shot with them in the previous phase. I guess maybe that's it. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I
Or
don't know.
maybe
I
I'm
have to
reading
look
too
at
much
that.
into it. But just the way that it reads here, it looks
Hmm.
like pretty much during the enemy turn, you can fire Overwatch. You can only use it once per turn,
Hmm.
but still,
But
I like the mechanic.
could you imagine having a full strength unit of flamers, something that basically auto wounds? If you roll your
Yeah.
sixes, it's an auto wound.
Well, they
I mean,
mentioned that in
yeah,
the article, I think, when they first announced it.
I mean, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
You
there's
could
a lot of
strategically,
stacking.
yeah, you could set your guys in motion and put them in a spot where they kind of block an area off. That'd be
Mm-hmm.
kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I plan on doing some Overwatch myself. Pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah, man.
Um, let's move on to the heroic interventions, which were always in ninth edition, a little situational. And I always had to kind of figure out how to explain it when everybody asked, well, what the heck is a heroic intervention? Um, essentially, if you're not aware, in ninth edition, a heroic intervention was a way that when the enemy charged into a unit, if you had a character nearby that was
Okay,
able to do a heroic intervention, that they had to be close, then they could do like a counter charge. So that the benefit would
okay,
be that the enemy unit could only do melee on the unit that it declared a charge against, so that as long as it survived, in theory, your stronger character would be able to, in the fight phase, would be able to fight back and
okay,
not be targeted by a melee attack. So that was the benefit of the heroic intervention in ninth edition. And this one, they have moved it now, instead of just in being a core rule, it is now a stratagem. So for 2 CP, whenever the enemy completes a charge within 6 inches of one of your units, you can make a counter charge. I believe that is only for characters, but you don't have to be so close
okay,
to them now. So reading the actual stratagem, during the opponent's charge phase, one unit from your army that's within 6 inches that would be able to declare a charge can essentially now charge into and heroically intervene. You can only select a vehicle unit from your army if it's a walker. So really, this is not just for characters anymore. I stand corrected. It's not for a leader or a character. It can be for anybody, for any unit.
okay,
Can do now a heroic intervention.
okay. Well, that's cool.
So opens it up a little bit. Pretty cool.
Yeah, but you got to decide if you want to spend the points.
Yeah.
So,
Again, points are going to be hard to come by. So
mm-hmm.
Um, let's hit a couple more here before we move on. I want to do the one around the fight first,
Yeah,
just to hit that quickly. So in previous edition, charging units always fight first. So a charge unit goes in,
yep,
they charge, they fight first, unless and then now, regardless of what the enemy had, the charging units always go first. Well, now they have, if you charge into a unit that has the fight first keyword, then that unit, the enemy unit, would go first in the fight phase, which is
okay,
pretty critical. I would assume that most leaders and characters, worth their salt or epic heroes, are going to have a fight
yeah.
first keyword. But if you just took a captain or something. I don't know. Are they going to have a fight first keyword? Maybe, maybe not. So should be interesting there.
I'd be interested to see if some of your melee only units, especially like the Tyranids, I haven't looked through all the data sheets and stuff yet,
Hmm.
but I know a few of them. Part of their thing is they're not characters; they're just sort of battle line troops, but they do have the fight first. But all they have are melee weapons, so you would hope that somewhere for balance sake that there would be more than just characters get that fight first keyword.
Yeah, and I think they're one of the reason they added this, because a lot of people were thinking that 40k was going to go the route of Sigmar, which is I go you go. It's the
Mm-hmm.
alternating
Right.
turns. But this is a way to get around that a little bit. I think to
Okay.
mix it up, so that if you've got a mixture of fight first units in your army, and your opponent is charging in, it's not
Mm-hmm.
a straight I go you go, but in the
Mm-hmm.
fight phase it gets a little bit into that, which is a, I mean, if we're not going to get the I go you go, then this is
Yeah.
maybe a good balance.
They wouldn't get to. Okay, so say like an enemy unit charged a character with a fight first keyword.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that character now, even though the other unit charged, that character gets to fight first.
Correct.
Then the charging unit fights.
Right.
Now that character doesn't get to fight again, right?
No.
Where they would
No.
normally land. They just move their turn
Right.
in the sequence. Okay.
Right. So that if you charge Gazgul Thraka, right, one of
Mm-hmm.
my my characters. I would assume he would have a fight first.
I
If
would
you
hope
charge
so.
him in and you don't have a fight first, but you're charging in, then during the fight phase, Gazgul would get to go
Okay.
first, even though you charged him.
Yeah.
Which this represents the maybe the more melee centric
Mm-hmm.
units and how they would. You're not going to get the jump on them essentially.
Yeah. That's cool.
I like it. All right, last rule that we'll cover, and then we'll move on. The aircraft. There's one change to the aircraft, and I don't. I only own a couple of
Mm-hmm.
aircraft units models, but they're changing the aircraft. You have a minimum movement, of course, so you can't just hover in midair.
Okay.
Um, but you have a minimum. I think it's 20 inches. I think that's right. But you no longer have a maximum movement. So previously in ninth edition, you had to move up, a minimum of X amount of inches, depending on the model's statistics.
Okay.
But you usually had a maximum. Like you couldn't just fly, zoom all over the map. Well, now you can and fly off the map, I guess, if you
Oh
want to.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So just an interesting dynamic. It makes sense that you wouldn't have a restriction on how far you could move. I guess
Yeah.
maybe just makes it a little easier for people to position.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. It
So
sounds good to me.
lots of rules, and I'm sure we'll get into more of these as we start playing games, hopefully in the next month, and have some
Yeah.
thoughts and opinions on how we're using some of the new rules and stratagems. And we may even come back and say, actually, what we said previously was completely wrong. That's the way it goes
But
on Dad
that's
Hammer.
hey, we're not experts.
No, we just like to have fun. So
Yeah, man.
I'm happy that the rules are out, and I am excited to put them into action on the table.
Me too.
All right, for our last segment, let's hit the index. We'll hit the Tyranid Index and then the index cards. Um, but the Tyranid Index, and there's a difference between an index and a codex. The index is
Mm-hmm.
really just the core rules and mechanics of an army. So it's just going to be your data sheets and some of the buffs and the core army rules. Essentially, what they've rolled out for the faction focus, but just fully
Mm-hmm.
fleshed out with the data sheets for all of the units. So that's what an index is versus what a codex is going to have all the fluff and the lore and the pictures of how you paint your units and
Mm-hmm.
extra goodies and stuff like that. And supposedly with the index, we're going to have the extra detachment rules,
Right.
which would be cool. But focus on the Tyranid Index that was released. Steve, what were your first impressions when looking through the index?
I felt like they kept to what they said, that you were just going to need a couple of pages of rules to set out in front of you,
Mm-hmm.
which I think above all else, that was the most important thing. I feel like the way that it's laid out, and if it stays that way, you're going to be able to print out 2 or 3 pages and you're going to have it right there. And you don't have to flip back and forth between multiple sections of a codex, because those rules were sometimes spread way out. And if you'd picked several different, stratagems or abilities or whatever, you might be skipping 20 pages back and forth. So yeah, I mean, that's above all, it seems like they're staying good to their word from what they laid out at Warhammer Fest. Fewer abilities. It's just going to be easier to follow.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm looking at it now. They have the first page is the army rule. So if you've seen the
Mm-hmm.
faction focus for every army, and we've talked about all of them, and that's what we've been really discussing primarily is the main army rule. So in this case for Tyranid, it's the synapse and shadow and the warp abilities. That's on one page with a
Mm-hmm.
really cool picture next to it. And then the second page on the index is the detachment rule. So based upon the layout of just the Tyranid index, I would assume that every other army is going to have a one page, maybe two, but primarily
Mm-hmm.
one page of core army rules, which we've seen in the faction focus, and then the following page will be a single detachment. So one
Right.
detachment. Um, maybe Space Marines might have multiples since they're doing Space Wolves and Dark Angels and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. That's possible. But for armies like Orcs or Votan, I would assume just out of the gate they'll have probably one detachment, and that's it. Maybe not as many detachments for all the various clans and things, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Um, and then after that, you have your 2 pages of stratagems, and then there's the enhancements if you have certain types of models on the table. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it, right?
I think
So
it's
it's
great.
pretty brief. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody will want a 60-page tome of extra rules, and they'll miss that. But man, I never remembered that stuff anyway, and I got so sick of having to use the little post-it note bookmarks on all my
Mm-hmm.
pages in my codex, and then heaven help you if you played a Space Marine chapter where you
Oh
had
man.
the Space Marine codex with all the bookmarks in it, and then you had your chapter with all of
Yes.
the bookmarks in it. It's, oh my gosh, it was way too much.
And I feel like the Necron Codex was just as bad in the sense that, man, they're complicated enough, and, and it was all over the place.
Yeah.
Some of it was behind data sheets, some of it was in front of data sheets, and I was like, wow, I just cannot keep up.
No. And what would happen with me, especially, and I thought it was worse in eighth edition. What would happen with me is that I would forget that I had special rules. Like, oh yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
forgot that I get a +1 here if or that I'm this type of faction. I remember when I'm playing Space Wolves, and if you look in the Space Marine Codex, you get little bonuses to your melee and charge and
Yeah,
stuff, and it's on
yeah,
one specific page. Well, okay, got that, and then I got to flip over to the psychic page. But if I have different psychic abilities based on the Space Wolf Psyker that I have. Well, that's in the Space Wolf Codex, and that's
right.
just for the psychic phase. And then what if I want to do a smite? Well, now I got to go back to the. Oh,
It's
I'm
rough, man.
I'm worn out just talking about it.
Well, and when you're not getting 2 games a weekend, right? Like
No,
we've talked about before, we might go a month without playing, and you just can't get the kind of repetition you need to get your own organization strategy, and that's
yeah,
most of it. It's not like you can't remember the rules or something, because it's always nagging in the back of your head. I'm like, man, I am forgetting something,
yeah.
and I need to know it, but I don't want to slow this down anymore. We're already like 3 hours into this game, and it's turn 2.
Oh
And
gosh,
you're like,
5 6 hours. Yeah, and
but you understand what I'm saying? It's
yeah,
just
I don't want to. It turns into work, like I'm preparing for a
yeah.
speech.
Yeah.
And I don't
A
I don't want to do
presentation.
that. Yeah, I don't want to
No,
give a
no, no, no.
PowerPoint,
I want to get out there and I want to lose quick. That's what I do.
mission accomplished. Yeah, I'm the same way. And if I always felt like the consolation prize is if I did lose because I forgot something, there was always the
Hmm.
asterisk next to it. I'm like, yeah, I lost, but I didn't use half the abilities.
Yeah,
That was
half my team was in quarantine. I don't know what you want me to do.
yeah, it wasn't my fault. No, I mean, it's trying to remember all this is just no
Yeah.
good. I Battle Scribe helped, RIP,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Battle Scribe helped and you know ordered things so that I could try to remember it, but I would still forget stuff all the time. So I think the way they've laid out the index is good. They've made it simpler. They've reduced the complexity,
Hmm.
but they have shifted some of the wording and the rules to the data sheets, which I don't mind because when you're getting and you're in your movement phase, for example, you there's going to be a time where you're going to look at all your units like, okay, I got to make sure this one is in range of this aura and this one's over here and this is
Hmm.
doing this thing, but at least you have it all in front of you and you're not
Yeah.
having to flip back and forth.
Yeah, I'm totally in agreement there. That's going to be so much better.
The only thing they didn't include on here, which I don't mind, is the points values. So there's no points values on these data sheets, which I understand why they wouldn't do that
Yeah, I'm
because
pretty sure I get it.
when they want to replace them or update them or change
Mm,
something, and now you have to release the cards all over again. Oh boy,
yeah.
that's terrible. So
Well, I think they don't
yeah,
want people going out and organizing half-baked tournaments right now using 10th
yeah,
edition rules, because that's the linchpin. Like, you can't do it right now. You could with old point values, but
yeah. You can't
uh,
do that.
you
That's not
can't do
going to
that
work.
right now. No,
Mm-mm.
and I think that's the point. Like, they want everybody to have a fair shake. They don't want a bunch of people going out and practicing and getting ahead of the game. Um, which, I mean, it's fine. You know, if you're into that competitive scene, that's what you like. That's what you, man, do what you got to do, right? But I think this is to keep everybody as even as possible.
Yeah, or it could just
Because
artificially assign points values to your opponent. So
yeah.
it'd be like, hey, your Dark Angels intercessors are actually 600 points now.
Wait a minute, that's not funny
Yeah,
at all.
I think something's not working. Yeah, well, I'm excited for
Yeah.
the Space Marine Index, and of course, with from the leaks of the releases. Next week we'll get all of the rest of them. That's what I've heard by the end of
Mm-hmm.
next week, which today is as of this recording, we're on the 8th, so the 16th
Mm-hmm.
we'll have the rest of them, which was pretty exciting. And then maybe the app the following week with the points values, and
Mm,
then we'll actually be able to play. So pretty cool.
exciting. Yeah, man.
Very last thing we'll touch on is the index cards. They have, speaking of the index, they have released or provided an article where you can actually have a few options for printing out or using data sheets. One will be from this PDF download, just as they went with the Tyranids, where you can download the
Mm-hmm.
PDF. You could print those out. I mean, we talked about printing them maybe on cardstock or laminating them. There's all kinds of different ways you could do this, or put them on an iPad if you want to, laptop, something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then if you don't want to do that, if you don't like to just print things out, or as you joked, you don't have the ink cartridges to back all that up,
Jeez.
you could buy the actual cards, the index cards. Then they'll sell those, probably, my guess is like $30.
Yeah.
That's my guess. And which I like the idea of having, a physical product in my hand to spread out
Mm-hmm.
on the table, like they do with Sigmar. The only downfall to that is if they change something, or they FAQ something. Well,
Yeah.
now your stuff is kind of out of date.
But, there's always blue painter's tape and a Sharpie. You can update your card the old fashioned way. It look a
Oh
little
my
tacky, but
gosh, are you
I
serious?
know, dude. Analog kid here, man.
Oh man, that would look so janky, though. I mean,
I'm doing it. I'm totally doing it.
well, okay. So let me provide an alternative. Maybe you buy the cards, and then when the new thing comes out, print out the PDF version, and then
Yeah.
just paste that on top of your card. It's
I'm not
still
gonna.
it's still
I
janky
don't
either
know.
way. Personally, I think I'm gonna go. Even though I'm a sucker for whatever product is coming out, I'm
Mm,
gonna buy it. I think I'm gonna stick with the PDFs, at least at the
yeah.
beginning, and then I want to see what the app the if the app is good, and they've
Yep.
said it's good. Well, who knows what good is, but if the app is usable and viable option for people, and I can pull out a tablet or a phone or something like that and use it,
Uh
then
huh.
that's probably the way I'll go.
Yeah. Let's just see how quickly the changes roll out too before you go spend an extra $30. I'd rather spend it on models or something, than I'm not going to paint.
Or tokens
Or
because you
tokens.
pre-ordered.
Hey,
Yeah.
well, no doubt, man.
Yeah. Well, this is all very exciting. Man, it's like a kid at Christmas right now with all this stuff coming out, new rules, new game modes, new models, new all kinds of stuff. Very exciting. Really looking forward to seeing all the new content over the next couple of weeks, and then finally getting our hands and
Mm-hmm.
on the table, rolling some dice and losing and or winning. Just depends. In
Winning or
my mind,
learning.
I'm always winning and casting out judgment, of course.
Yes, well, gotta
Yeah.
keep it up, man.
Well, that'll wrap up this episode of Dad Hammer Bolters and Booze. We thank you so much for listening. Please Make sure that you follow, like, subscribe, however you would like to contribute, comment on our social media posts, and check out our website, dadhammerpodcast.com. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Medicae Steve. Thank you to this delicious cocktail and Sir Reginald Swarmlord III himself for
Indubitably.
indubitably. Indeed, sir. Pip pip and cheerio and bottoms up, cheers, and all the other words. I am David the Warboss, and this is Medicae Steve, and we'll see you next time on Dad Hammer. Cheers, Steve.
Cheers, man. Take care.